The FIA has taken a firm stance when it comes to regulating drivers' conduct, especially when they're on the grid. Now, the pressure is on for drivers to be very cautious with their language and body language, as any misstep could cost them valuable points in the championship. On top of that, drivers face a serious consequence: a 1-month suspension if they're penalized 3 times for breaking the misconduct rules outlined in Article 12 of the FIA's regulations. This has sparked questions about whether the governing body has gone too far. More importantly, is this an indication that BNAM is taking things a little too personally? Recently, there has been a lot of buzz around the FIA's penalty system, particularly the updates to Article 12. According to the new rules, drivers will face penalties for more than just using foul language. It's not just about words anymore. Drivers' actions, whether verbal, written, or through gestures, will be closely monitored. If they display offensive, rude, or aggressive behavior, they could be penalized. This also includes physical altercations like elbowing, kicking, or any form of physical aggression towards other drivers or personnel. Now here's where things get interesting: the penalties themselves. For most motorsport competitions, the base fine for this type of behavior is $10,000. But for Formula One, the stakes are higher. Fines in F1 are multiplied by 4, meaning the first penalty could cost a driver $40,000. And it doesn't stop there. If a driver is penalized a second time, the fine doubles, and there's a 1-month suspension thrown in as well. That's right, a 1-month break from racing, on top of the hefty financial penalty. But what happens if the penalties continue to escalate? By the time a driver hits the 3rd penalty, the total fine would have skyrocketed to $120,000. And that's not all. There's also the risk of losing points in the championship standings. This means that instead of losing or gaining points on the track through racing, drivers could lose points based on their behavior off the track. It's a whole new set of risks that could seriously impact a driver's position in the championship. But the penalties don't stop with just financial consequences or suspensions. The new regulations also extend to any actions or words that could offend FIA personnel. Drivers now need to be incredibly careful about what they say or do around FIA staff members. Any words or actions that could be seen as morally damaging or harmful to the FIA or its representatives are also subject to penalties. And the rules are clear. This includes any actions or comments that could incite violence or hatred. This new approach has led many to believe that BNAM, the head of the FIA, might be taking things a bit too personally. After all, the FIA has been under fire from the media and drivers for quite some time now, particularly BNAM himself. With all the criticism he's faced, it wouldn't be surprising if he's tightening the reins to avoid any further issues. It's important to note that these new rules not only affect drivers, but also impact the wider motorsport culture. Any comments or behavior that go against the values the FIA stands for could now lead to serious penalties. The potential consequences of these penalties are massive for drivers. If a driver ends up accumulating 3 penalties, they could lose not just points, but also their participation in races. For example, imagine a driver heading into a back-to-back race weekend, a triple header, and suddenly they're hit with a suspension and a significant points deduction. Losing 20 or 30 points at that stage could be devastating, especially if they're already struggling to stay competitive in the middle of the pack or fighting for a few points in the lower categories. This strict approach from the FIA is starting to change the dynamics of the sport. Drivers are now under constant scrutiny, not just for what they do on the track, but also for how they conduct themselves off it. While some may argue that this shift is necessary for maintaining professionalism, others worry it could alter the very nature of racing, where emotions and high-stakes competition often lead to heated moments. For now, it seems like this new wave of regulation is here to stay, and drivers will have to adjust to this tighter control over their actions, both on and off the grid. These rules aren't just affecting drivers. Teams are also facing penalties if they don't comply with the FIA's instructions. For example, if a team refuses to follow regulations regarding participation in official events or ceremonies, they could face hefty fines and suspensions. The penalties for teams start with a $15,000 fine for the first offense, but that number can quickly double with repeated violations. Additionally, teams can be banned from access to reserved areas of the event for a month, and if the behavior continues, they could face a suspension of up to 6 months from certain areas, like the media zones or paddock. This could have a serious impact on how teams operate, especially if they're unable to access key areas during race weekends. It's a strong message from the FIA that no one, whether a driver or a team, will be exempt from these rules. And considering that these fines are multiplied by 4 for F1, the financial impact could be significant. These penalties are certainly set up to send a clear signal: behave professionally or face the consequences. Now, the FIA isn't just making rules for the sake of it. One major issue that's been raised by drivers is where the money from these fines is actually going. George Russell, along with other members of the GPDA, Grand Prix Drivers Association, has called for more transparency about how the funds are used. The issue of fines has come up before. Remember when Max Verstappen was fined $50,000 in 2021 for touching Lewis Hamilton's car in the paddock area after a controversial incident? Verstappen made a sarcastic comment at the time saying he hoped the FIA would have a nice dinner with his fine money. These kinds of sarcastic remarks might be more than just playful jabs. Today, they could result in even harsher penalties. It's clear that the FIA is looking to clamp down on this kind of behavior. The debate over fines, however, isn't just about the drivers. It's about the broader issue of where this money goes and how it's being spent within the FIA. The organization insists it's not a profit-driven entity, and the funds from fines are used for grassroots initiatives, which they argue outweigh the amount collected from penalties. Interestingly, some of the team principals, including Toto Wolff, have shown support for the FIA's stricter stance on behavior. Wolff, in particular, is a strong advocate for eliminating swearing from the sport, citing the negative impact it has on younger fans. He shared an experience where his young nephew, who goes karting, started swearing after hearing the language used by drivers. This concern is shared by several team principals who believe that drivers, as role models, need to set a better example, especially for the younger audience watching at home. This highlights a growing concern within the sport, not just about professional conduct, but about how drivers' actions influence the next generation. While some might feel these new regulations are a bit over the top, Wolff and others argue that it's necessary to protect the integrity of the sport and set a positive example for fans of all ages. If this trend continues, we might see more rules like these aimed at regulating behavior, both on and off the track. Despite the support from some team principals, there's no doubt that these changes have created division within the F1 community. While some see it as a necessary step toward cleaning up the sport, others believe it's taking things too far. The balance between maintaining professionalism and allowing drivers to express their emotions seems to be at the heart of this debate. Drivers, after all, are often under extreme pressure during race weekends, and emotions can run high. As for Bonham and the FIA, it's clear they're trying to create a more professional environment in Formula One, but whether these changes will be successful in the long term remains to be seen. Will the drivers and teams adapt to this new era of tighter regulations, or will the sport lose some of the raw emotion and passion that makes it so captivating? Time will tell, but one thing is certain. The FIA is sending a strong message that bad behavior, whether verbal or physical, will no longer be tolerated. In the end, the question remains: can the drivers reverse this trend, or are they now at the mercy of these stricter rules? It's clear that the landscape of Formula One is changing, and it's going to be up to the drivers, teams, and the FIA to find the right balance. For now, all eyes will be on how the new rules are enforced, how drivers adapt, and whether the public opinion on these changes shifts over time. One thing is for sure, the future of F1 as we know it could be shaped by these regulations. The impact could be far-reaching, affecting not just how drivers race but how they are perceived by fans and how the sport is consumed globally. The changes have already begun, but the ultimate question remains: will they improve the sport, or will they change it in ways that no one expected? If you're interested in hearing more about the ongoing changes in Formula One and what they mean for drivers and fans alike, be sure to check out the latest updates. And don't forget, if you want to dive deeper into some of the most controversial moments in recent F1 history, like Hamilton's testing with Fiat Ano, click on the video now appearing on your screen. Keep watching, stay informed, and let us know your thoughts on these developments. Do you think the FIA's changes are necessary, or is the sport losing some of its soul in the process? And that wraps up our deep dive into the FIA's latest changes and how they're reshaping the world of Formula One. It's clear that these new regulations are going to have a major impact on the drivers, teams, and the sport as a whole. But what do you think? Are these penalties too harsh, or are they a necessary step to maintain professionalism in F1? Do you believe the drivers can adjust to these rules, or will we see more tension and pushback in the future? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to drop your comments below. Let's get a conversation going. Do you agree with the new approach, or do you think the FIA is taking it a bit too far? If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth discussions on the latest F1 news, updates, and controversies. And hey, if you're curious about Hamilton's latest test with Fiat Ano and how it's playing out, don't miss the next video. It's popping up right on your screen now, so go ahead and click on it to stay up to date with everything happening in the F1 world. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.